So this is chapter 2. I was released from the mental hospital not too long after that magical romance began. Sandy agreed to authorize my departure early due to the fact that I had to be present at Roswell within the next couple of hours so nobody would ever know this incident happened. Unlike my last run-in with local law enforcement, it would not go public because of Sandy and the fact that I actually knew the arresting officer. In fact, I used to party with him back in my Quantico days. He was a flunky who wasn't built for the intellectual adversities a federal officer had to go through, so he did the most logical thing he could with his handicap. He became a cop. Although he refused to file a report against his old buddy, he was concerned for my safety after seeing my rant about almost being eaten by a giant man-eating vagina and my clothes turning into snakes, so that's why he made the decision to bring me to the psych ward. Before I left, I told Sandy my feelings for her and that I wanted to see her again once I got back. She agreed, so it would be a date. I remember feeling as if I was a kid again, like the world was just wide open with infinite possibilities. After my release, I made it to a federal air base and took a private flight out to Roswell. When I arrived, I was met by other military types and federal officers and briefed about the Nephilims. As I had already known, they were children, only 6 years of age, but had intellectual capabilities beyond even some of the greatest minds of today. It was also confirmed that they were in fact the offspring of the drunken aliens mixing their genetics with the hookers. Lastly, I even learned that they had different powers that they were learning how to cultivate back at the secret bunker in Oregon. When I finally had the opportunity to meet them in person, right away one stood out beyond all of the rest. I noticed him reading Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut, so I approached him. Once I introduced myself, he asked how much longer did he have to be here, and I told him I didn't know. He told me he needed some fresh air, so I agreed to take him outside. Once we got out there, he pulled out a rose pipe. I couldn't believe it. I thought this kid was about to start smoking crack right in front of me until I noticed him put a small greenish rock onto the pipe and take a huge hit. As he exhaled, I could smell a strong odor that I hadn't smelled in years. Deemster. After the smoke disappeared, he put his arms out and sort of shuffled his feet back and forth almost as if he had lost his balance. Then after about a minute or so, he looked at me with a big grin on his face. "This stuff is awesome." I asked him where he had got that, and he had told me he had snuck into some labs and confiscated it. I asked him how he had managed to accomplish that, and he stated he could become invisible at will. Then I told him to prove it, so he did. He became invisible right before my very eyes. Then in a couple of seconds he reappeared. So I asked why doesn't he just escape if he can do that, and he stated he was scared of the repercussions if he was caught. Then I explained if he were to stay here, he'll probably end up working for the NSA, and his rebellious spirit would most likely cause him to pull an Edward Snowden, and he would be forced to go into hiding. That's when he told me that I should let him come and live with me, of course, until he found his own way in life. So I asked him, why would he trust me? He further explained that due to his hybrid genetics, he had a third eye-like sense and could perceive that although I was a narc, I was a good person. He also told me he sensed the darkness that hovered over me and that I should take a hit of the Deemster because it might help me confront what was bothering me, so I agreed. While I held the pipe in my mouth and lit it, I thought that either this was a good idea or I had just reached an all-time low, being that I was sharing drugs with a 6-year-old kid. After I took the hit and exhaled that godforsaken taste out of my mouth, I found myself on another plane of existence. I instantly saw my late grandfather back in his Golden Glove days. He was wearing his old boxing attire, gloves, shorts, and boots, and was punching a giant nut sack like a punching bag. Then I see my late grandmother giggling at what he was doing. Next I saw a reverberating asshole. It just kept opening and closing. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Resist the anus, Charles." The reverberating asshole kept expanding until I was entirely consumed by it. All I know is that the next thing that happened, I was descending into its giant bowels like I was falling down a well. As I kept descending, occasionally being smacked by giant globs of fecal matter, I looked up into the opening and saw the professor looking down at me. "Charles, it seems what I have feared has happened. You have penetrated the anus and now you're covered in the shit. Professor, help me." "Don't worry. I've given the beast a laxative, so brace yourself, Charles, and I would recommend that you close your mouth and eyes. I see movement. Yes, here it comes." Then an eruption of liquidity happened. Before I even knew what was going on, I began to ascend as the pressure pushed me up the hole to the top, and in a matter of seconds I was blasted from the anal well like a volcanic eruption. Then I heard the professor's voice. "There she blows." Suddenly, I found myself back in space and time standing next to the kid. Then a huge blast sounded off in the distance, and the kid told me it's probably another crash landing. Supposedly, this is a frequent occurrence because the military has this technology that kills all electronic systems when they fly over this area. He tells me it's a safety precaution because, as I know, this is a highly classified area. I ask who would fly over this area. He replies, aliens, of course. The ones that come to this planet fall in love with alcohol and end up crashing their saucers from the adverse effects of drunk driving. Then some military types intrude upon us and tell me they need my expertise with interrogation of some subjects that have crash landed and are being detained not too far from here. It seems some of my colleagues from the Bureau must have told the military types about my charming tactics in the interrogation room. I comply and am brought to an underground bunker. In an interrogation room within the bunker, I enter a room and find myself face to face with one of the short green creatures with an enormous anomaly for a head chained to the table it is sitting in front of. My name is Agent Thompson. I was wondering what you were doing flying over this restricted area. Fuck you, you pig bastard. As he says this, I can smell the alcohol on his breath. Oh, so you want to play this the hard way. Without hesitation, I backhand the belligerent alien creature, then I hit him with 3 more. Now let's try this again. What are you doing flying over this restricted area? Is that all you got? The alien then spits some blood onto the ground. I don't want to do this, and believe me, you don't either, but you leave me no choice. I'll give you one last chance to answer my question. Fuck you, pig. So be it. Have it your way. Then, with all of my might, I punched the extraterrestrial right square in his nuts, and like a charm, the aftermath of my closed fist hitting him under the belt works every time. Once the pace dies down, he tells me everything I want to know. It seems a company by the name of RevoCat has signed a contract with aliens in exchange for asylum after a supposed catastrophe ensues that they will create, killing off the Earth's population. That's why he's here. He's a lawyer and was sent to finish the signing part of the agreement. After the deal went down, he went to get his beak wet and got lost as he was flying the saucer, hence him flying over this restricted area. I ask, what do you have to gain from all this? He explains that after the catastrophe, they will have better access to the Earth without having to worry about instances like crashing because of the military's technology or even having to be hidden from the masses because they will cease to exist. So this was the plot, to turn the Earth into a way station of drunken aliens who were forbidden to drink on their own planet because they couldn't handle their alcohol. Well, not on my watch. Back at the base, I found the kid and told him I needed him to come with me on a secret mission to save humanity. He agreed, and as I left Roswell, so did he. Just nobody would know because he would be traveling incognito, as his powers allowed him to. So now the scene changes. After our flight landed, we headed to Sandy's. As you can imagine, she was shocked when I showed up with the kid and explained everything to her. Of course, she didn't believe me about the kid being an offspring of aliens and thought I might have relapsed until he showed her his disappearing trick. Then after witnessing the supernatural occurrence, she began to interrogate the kid with about 1,000,000 questions, which was naturally part of her nature being a psychologist. While the both of them were occupied playing psychoanalysis, I got online and began to dig up some facts about RevoCat. I had found out that the company's CEO was a man by the name of Bill Brainsworth. Brainsworth was a doctor of physics who, since his reign as a tech giant, had got into the rocket business. He was actually one of the biggest lobbyists to Congress when NASA lost most of their funding, known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, paving the way for companies like RevoCat to take over the space industry. I also found that Brainsworth had gotten some bad publicity a couple of years back for his supposed anti-patriotic comments saying America was becoming a cesspool like the rest of the world and it needs to be cleansed. But it would be later clarified he was just speaking about the pollution problem and global warming. As I was supposedly surfing the web for information on the billionaire physicist, I had come across a lawsuit where supposedly he had gotten into some trouble for a string of sexual harassment allegations coming from some of the female physicists who worked in the same office and laboratory as him. He had supposedly settled out with an agreement that after paying the hefty bill, they wouldn't go public, forcing him to lose out on grants that was funding his research. Now, I didn't quite know how Brainsworth was going to implement the global catastrophe, but I now knew he was a whack job, and I could bet it had something to do with the rockets he was launching out into space, and I was sure as hell going to find out. Luckily, RevoCat had an office in the very same town we resided in, and that was the next destination. As we left Sandy's, I told her I had this one last thing I had to take care of, and then I would be back for her. Then the kid and I headed to Revocat's headquarters. I explained the plan to the kid, that he might have to use his invisibility powers if Brainsworth wasn't there. As I predicted, he was out when we got there. The lady at the desk told me since I was a federal agent, she would call Brainsworth and leave him a message. I told her that wouldn't be necessary. Next, I explained the plan to the kid, that he had to find his office and download any information he could find out on a global catastrophe, all while he was invisible, of course. He told me it was not a problem and to consider the job done. That's when he disappeared and was gone for all of about 20 minutes. Then he returned with a computer chip and told me he took care of the problem. Outside in my car, I loaded the chip to my laptop and learned that Brainsworth's operation was in play. He had sent numerous phallus-shaped rockets into orbit that had a sophisticated machine on them that held an airborne pathogen that would wipe the Earth's population clean once it was released. The diabolical plan was called Cosmic Orgasm. Then the kid told me not to worry because he had deactivated the machines and that they were indefinitely inoperable. The multi-billion-dollar phallus-shaped machines would now be nothing more than a piece of junk floating in space like giant cosmic dildos. It looks like the kid had ruined Brainsworth's wet dream. He further explained some biological science stuff that I couldn't understand. Pretty much the gas was released away from the Earth's atmosphere into space, which rendered the gas stagnant due to the laws of space's atmosphere. Long story short, he had saved the day and ruined Revocat's machines. And he told me he had Brainsworth's exact coordinates. He was vacationing on some private island that was not on any maps to the public. So without further ado, we headed out on our mission to find the deranged, perverted physicist.